MIT YouTube は各週金曜日に更新しています。その他にもテーマを決めて不定期ですが更新しています。よろしくお願いします。
For Agile at a bank, it's a great way for organizations to join up technology as well as the line of business or operations to get better requirements. So before I joined Red Hat, I was at a large bank. We originally started with waterfall, and we found that there were gaps in the requirements, so we moved over to an Agile methodology. And by doing Agile with shorter stories and a more iterative style of development, where we're releasing every 3 weeks, we allowed the customers inside the bank to see what we were building, to give feedback on what they thought they wanted, and refine that. And the part about software development is to continually iterate over this, to do it over and over and over again, because you may think you want the button to be green, and then when you see it built, you might decide that blue is better. Or you might decide a different approach to onboarding. So the Agile approach allows people to do this. And importantly, also go back and see, what did I do wrong? What could I do differently in a retrospective? It also, for us, was very important because as the end users built stories, we could score the stories with points, and those points told us how big the stories were, or how much work we can do during a sprint cycle. And that allowed them to understand that, oh, this feature is not worth that many points, and they can do something simpler. Or maybe decide it was very important to them and they wanted to spend a full sprint doing that one feature. So it's a kind of a currency where we can talk about how much something costs to build. Now, what's super interesting is that with AI development, so some people are questioning, do you still need Agile? Can you get to a place where you still keep stories and the end users build the requirements and you feed it to the system, the AI models, whether it's Claude Code or something, or Codex, and that system builds that. So there's some interesting aspects of how Agile develops over time in an more AI-centric world.
2つ質問があります。1つはアジャイルのアプローチです。我々デジタルサービスとかを開発しているところはどんどんアジャイルのアプローチを採用しています。一方で従来型の業務システムを開発保守しているメンバーはなかなかアジャイルの必要性とかアジャイルのバリューっていうものを理解しにくいかなと思っています。このあたりについて、ご助言ありますか？
Okay. So I think what's really important, and Agile is a methodology. It's designed to allow companies to build software that's closer to what customers want, whether they're internal customers or external customers, and do that and get feedback quicker. The idea that you can just build software and you know from the beginning what you want, that's not how the real world operates. You need to build something, try it out, see if it works. And the idea of an Agile is let's break things into smaller pieces, let's build it, let's get feedback, see if it works, and then we'll build something better. Okay? So historically, you built a requirements document that's maybe 100 or 200 pages long, and you spend a year or two building it, and while you're doing that, the market changes. Your competitors change, your customers' needs change. What you built, what you wrote 2 years ago is no longer matching what the market needs. By going to Agile, whether you're doing every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks of sprints, you are adapting continually to what the customer is saying, internal or external, to what your competitors are doing, to what new technology is around. If you wrote a requirements document 2 years ago, what would it have said about AI? Almost nothing. So by breaking things into smaller pieces, you can be more effective. And it's important to do that. Now, vibe coding, for example, that a lot of people are starting to do now, that's more of a reflection of let me very quickly do something, see if I like it, see if I don't like it, see if it works, and then do it again. And I'm prompting the computer the AI to change what it's doing. It's no different than in Agile where your line of business or your operations people are telling the developers what to build through stories. Prompting is like a story in that respect. So what's important is continually doing something over and over and over again. If you look at the release cadence or the release velocity of fintech companies, some companies are releasing 97 times a year. If you look at the number of iOS releases for a company like Kalshi or Binance, it's upwards of 97 times a year. If you look at historical banks globally, it's about 12 times a year. With Canadian and American banks, with Canadian banks and Japanese banks about 10 times a year, and American banks about 15 times a year. Now, the good news is that the banks are doing it 50% faster than they were 5 years ago. So they have much more velocity. But still, if they're only releasing 12 times a year, and the fintechs are doing it 100 times a year, they have much more feedback. Their customers are telling a lot more what's happening. They're looking at logs and understanding what's working, what's not working, where the errors lie. And they can be much more reactive to what the market needs by doing things more quickly. And Agile is a way to get more velocity and to get closer to what the customer wants. And that's the value of it. And that's why I think it's a lot of, if you're doing waterfall, you need to understand why you're doing it, and is there a better way to do it?
アジャイルで開発するときに、アジャイルのチームって7、8人、多くても10人ぐらいでやりますと。で、その生成 AI での生成 AI を使うとコーディングとかものづくりのパフォーマンスが格段に1人の人が作れる量が増えます。そうすると従来の7、8人のチームなんだけれども、デベロッパーが作れるボリュームってすごく増えますと。でこれがすごい大きな影響、すごい大きな可能性を持つと思うんですけども、どういう未来を予想しますか？
So with AI, what will happen is developers become more productive. So what does that mean? So when you're doing Agile, you say the number of story points you can get done in a sprint. Maybe you're doing 100 story points. If you incorporate AI, maybe your team is doing 150 or 200 or 300 story points during that sprint. So there's what's called more velocity in the development team. So as the users write stories, more stories can get done in that same sprint cycle. So they're increasing the productivity. The one interesting idea that I'm playing with and I'm thinking about is what happens if the end users write the stories themselves, and what if you then take those stories, feed them into the AI model? What becomes super important are those requirements. The AI models eventually will build software based on those requirements. And if that's the case, then how do we think about the value of source code? Do you regenerate their source code whenever your requirements change? Do they become ephemeral? So there's an interesting thought process about what that means. And when you do that, how can you be secure about what the end users are doing? So maybe there's two sets of stories. Maybe there's stories from the perspective of what the business needs, and maybe there's a set of stories from the tech perspective. That tech perspective says use this language, develop in microservices, make it containers, abide by these security standards that we have in the bank. So there may be two sets of requirements, and AI takes them and builds something that matches the designs of the end users, but also matches the requirements of the technical users. And that will give great velocity. The risk to this is that if IT organizations don't evolve fast enough, the end users may decide to do this themselves. And then you have this shadow IT department that may not be secure. So how do you give people the tools they need so they can do it properly with central IT and move together safely and fast?
じゃあ、少しジェネラルな質問で、レッドハットさんは世界中で活動されてます。はい、で、日本の企業の AI 活用に関して、日本の企業にはどんな課題があるというふうに見えてますか？
はい、ありがとうございます。日本のお客様はですね、まだ AI の POC が一 一段落していよいよ本格化っていうところにいらしてるんですけど、やっぱりエージェンティック AI ってなるとそのデータのセキュリティとかデータをどこに置くかっていうのも結構な課題で、AI に食わせようと思うデータの準備の方が9割ぐらい大変で、データ整ったら AI に食わせて推論したりできるんですけど、どこのお客様もそのデータの準備、事前となるデータの準備とかそういうことに今課題を持ってらっしゃるかなというのが日本のお客様全般での認識です。
ありがとうございます。データの準備本当に大事だと思うんですけども、データっていろんなものがあるじゃないですか。なんで私たちも社内で話をしていてもデータの準備をしなきゃいけないのは分かると。だけどそこで準備しなきゃいけないデータっていうのは今社内にあるどれのことなんだろうねっていうことで結構悩んじゃったりするんですけど他の企業さん見てもそういうところってありますか？
そうですね、まずAI で何をしたいかっていうところをまず決めないと何のデータを準備したらいいかも分かんないので、やっぱり何の目的で AI を使うかって、社内のアドミニストレーティブな、生産性の向上っていうところは第一歩だと思うんですけど、今度お客様へ提供する情報とかになると何を AI 活用したら一番お客様のためとその企業様の社員のためになるかっていうところを皆さんまだ決めあぐねていて、それは決まらないからじゃあ整備するデータもなんだっけっていうところが今ちょうど模索中のお客様が多いかなっていう印象ですね。
じゃあ我々できることとしては、ユースケースとか POC を具体的にしながらこのユースケースは効果あるぞと、このためにのデータはこういうものが必要だと、こういうものを一つ一つまずは整備していく。
そうですね。
その延長線上で理解が深まれば、こういうデータも整備しておこうみたいな、こんな方向に進めればそういうことを目指していけばいいですかね。
はい、そうですね。今おっしゃったように AI の世界って特に今までのウォーターフォールと違ってもう完璧にデザインしたものを作るっていうよりは、ごちゃごちゃ不出来な状態でもみんなで良くしていくっていう、それこそアジャイルな世界なので、やっぱり最初からパーフェクションを求めずに使ってみたら、3割ぐらいいいことあったねって、学びがあったから次インプルーブしましょうっていうのを、開発の人も業務ユーザーの方も全員が同じ気持ちで AI の業務を育てていくっていうような時代がこれから来るんじゃないかなと思っています。
ありがとうございます。ぜひ日本の企業の AI 活用が進むように引き続きお力添えいただければと思います。よろしくお願いします。
こちらこそよろしくお願いします。赤い銀行様が、トップリーダーでいらっしゃいますので、失敗を恐れず新しいものにチャレンジして日本の金融業界様、それから日本のお客様の AI の、活用をリードしていただきたいと思います。よろしくお願いします。
よろしくお願いします。ありがとうございました。
はい。